The moment Phyllis stormed into the room, everything in Genoa City sounded to shift on its axis, as if the air itself tasted the explosion that was about to unfold. Patty had slightly finished speaking, her voice pulsing with a blend of despair and defiance, when the sharp crack of a poke echoed through the space, silencing everyone in a moment. Phyllis's hand dallied in the air for a bit of an alternate after the impact, her casket heaving, her eyes blazing with a fury that had been erecting for far too long. Patty staggered backward, clinging her impertinence, shock submerging her expression as she tried to reuse what had just happened. But Phyllis didn't give her the chance to recover. No, this wasn't just about wrathfulness. This was about verity, dangerous, buried, explosive verity that had the power to shatter everything they allowed. They knew about Jack. You suppose you're the only one who knows secrets? Phyllis whizzed, her voice cutting through the pressure like a blade. The room was firmed, every brace of eyes locked on her as she took a step closer to Patty, her presence fostering, impregnable. You've been playing games, digging into the history, stirring effects up like you always do. But you have no idea what you've uncovered. You don't understand what Jack is able of. Patty's lips parted, her defiance fluttering as query crept by. You're lying, she shot back weakly, though her voice demanded its usual conviction. You're just trying to scarify me. Phyllis let out a bitter laugh, one that held no humor, only times of pain, treason, and buried knowledge. Scare you? Oh, Patty, if I wanted to scarify you, I'd be doing a lot further than that. She leaned in near, lowering her voice just enough to make it feel like a secret meant only for Patty, though everyone's strained to hear. I'm trying to advise you. The word hung in the air, heavy and portentous. Across the room, Jack stood rigid, his face pale, his usual countenance cracking in a way that no bone had ever seen ahead. Phyllis, he said sprucely, a warning laced in his tone. That's enough. But she didn't indeed look at him. No, Phyllis snapped, her aspect still locked on Patty. It's not enough. Not presently. I've kept this buried for too long. I've defended you, Jack. I've defended your image, your precious character. But I'm done. Do you hear me? I'm done pretending. A murmur gurgled through the room as the weight of her words began to sink by. This wasn't just another argument. This was commodity bigger. Commodity darker. Patty's breathing quickened, her earlier bravado dissolving into commodity, near to fear. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice slightly above a tail. Phyllis uncurled, eventually turning her aspect toward Jack. The look in her eyes was ruinous, a admixture of heartache, wrathfulness, and commodity that nearly recalled remorse. You want to tell her? She challenged. Or should I? Jack's jaw tensed, his silence speaking volumes. And that was all the answer Phyllis demanded. Fine, she said coldly. I'll do it. She turned back to Patty, and for a moment, it felt like the entire world held its breath. Jack isn't the man you suppose he is, Phyllis began, each word deliberate, heavy with meaning. He's not the idol. He's not the victim. And he's surely not innocent. Patty shook her head, backing down slightly. No, that's not true. Jack prevaricated, Phyllis cut in sprucely. About everything. About what happened that night. About who he hurt. About the choices he made that changed all of our lives. The pressure in the room came nearly unsupportable, thick enough to suffocate. What night? Patty demanded, though her voice quivered. Phyllis took a deep breath, as if bracing herself before stepping off a precipice. The night that was supposed to vanish. The night everyone agreed no way to talk about again. The night Jack made a decision that destroyed someone, and also covered it up like it no way happened. Gasps echoed around the room. Patty's eyes widened, her mind racing as fractions of half-forgotten recollections began to surface. No, that doesn't make any sense. It does, Phyllis claimed, her voice rising. It makes perfect sense once you see the verity. Jack didn't just make a mistake, Patty. He made a choice. A calculated, deliberate choice. And when the consequences came crashing down, he didn't face them. He buried them. Jack eventually moved, stepping forward. That's enough, he said, his voice low but firm. You don't know what you're talking about. Phyllis's head snapped toward him, her eyes flashing. "Didn't I? Because I was there, Jack. I saw it. I know what you did." The words hit like a lemon. Silence followed, thick, suffocating silence. Patty looked between them, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. "What did he do?" she rumored. Phyllis didn't vacillate this time. "He let it be," she said. "He stood there and let it be when he could have stopped it. And subsequently, he made sure no bone would ever find out." A collaborative rustle filled the room. Patty's knees nearly gave out as the counter-accusations sank in. "No, Jack wouldn't. He couldn't." "But he did," Phyllis said, her voice softer now, but no less violent. "And you've been chasing ghosts, Patty, allowing your uncovering some grand conspiracy. The verity is, the real secret has been right in front of you each on." Jack's expression hardened, but there was commodity differently there too, commodity unmistakable. Guilt. And in that moment, everything changed. Patty saw it. Everyone did. The denial, the wrathfulness, the precisely constructed facade, it all began to deteriorate under the weight of Phyllis's disclosure. "You're lying," Patty said again, but this time, it sounded more like a plea than in blameworthiness. Phyllis shook her head sluggishly. "I wish I was." The room felt colder ever, as if the verity itself had drained all the warmth from it. Jack closed his eyes compactly, as though accepting the ineluctable. When he opened them again, there was no further denial, only the heavy burden of a secret that could no longer stay retired. And, just like that, Genoa City would no way be the same again. The silence that followed felt endless, suffocating, as though time itself had stopped to witness the unraveling of a verity too heavy to ignore. Patty's breath came in shallow, uneven bursts, her fritters still pressed against the sting on her impertinence, but the physical pain had formerly faded, replaced by commodity far worse. Mistrustfulness, fear, and a creeping consummation that the world she allowed, she understood, had just been shattered beyond form. Jack didn't speak right down. He stood there, motionless, as if the weight of Phyllis's words had embedded him to the ground. His mind contended, recollections clawing their way to the face, recollections he'd spent times burying, persuading himself they no longer signified, that they had been handled, resolved, cancelled. But they hadn't been. And now, they were them. Exposed. "Say commodity," Patty demanded, her voice pulsing as she took a reluctant step toward him. "Tell me she's lying. Tell me this is just another bone of her games." Jack looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment, there was commodity nearly repentant in his eyes. That alone was enough to make Patty's stomach drop. "Patty," he began, his voice low, simulated. "No," she snapped, shaking her head violently. "Do and say my name like that. Do and look at me like that. Just answer the question." Phyllis crossed her arms, watching the exchange with a grim sense of ineluctability. "Go on, Jack," she said coldly. "This is your moment. Be the honest man you've always pretended to be." Jack shot her a sharp look, but there was no real wrathfulness behind it, only prostration. "You suppose this is easy," he said. "You suppose dragging this out into the open is going to fix anything?" "No," Phyllis replied flatly. "But it's going to stop the falsehoods." Patty turned back to Jack, her eyes glassy now, brimming with unshed gashes. "What night is she talking about?" she rumored. "What did you do?" Jack dithered. That vacillation spoke louder than any concession ever could. "It was a long time agone," he eventually said, as though that ever softened the blow. Patty let out a concave laugh. "That's your defense?" "That it was a long time agone." "You do and understand the situation," Jack claimed, running a hand through his hair. "Effects were complicated." "They're always complicated with you," Phyllis murmured under her breath. Jack ignored her, keeping his focus on Patty. There were a lot of people involved. Feelings were high. Opinions were made in the heat of the moment. And someone got hurt, Patty cut in, her voice dropping. "That's what she said. Someone got hurt, and you just let it be." Jack's jaw tensed. "It wasn't that simple." "Also make it simple," Patty cried, her countenance eventually cracking. Because right now, it sounds like you stood there and watched someone's life fall piecemeal and did nothing to stop it. The blameworthiness hung in the air, heavy and inarguable. Jack closed his eyes compactly, as if bracing himself. I didn't know how bad it would get, he admitted still. I allowed. It would stop before it went too far. Phyllis let out a bitter scarf. That's the taradiddle you've been telling yourself all these times. Jack turned on her. You ain't get to judge me. You were there too. Yes, Phyllis shot back, her voice rising. And the difference is, I ain't mock I was innocent. That landed hard. Patty's aspect snapped back to Phyllis. You were there, she asked, confusion and treason mixing in her tone. You knew about this the whole time. Phyllis didn't blench. I knew enough. Enough to what? Stay quiet. Patty demanded. Phyllis dithered, just for an alternate. Enough to know that if the verity came out, it would destroy further than just Jack. That's not your decision to make. Patty fired back. No, Phyllis agreed, her voice quieter now. But it was the decision I made anyway. The room fell silent again, but this time, it wasn't just pressure, it was disillusionment. The kind that seeps into your bones and changes the way you see everything. Patty looked between them, her expression worsening. So all these times you both just carried on like nothing happened, she said. Like whatever this was didn't count? It's signified, Jack said snappily. It's signified further than you know. Also, why hide it? Patty shot back. Why bury it so deep that no one could ever find it? Jack didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Phyllis stepped forward, her aspect steady. Because the verity isn't just unattractive, Patty. It's dangerous, she said. And once it's out, there's no putting it back. Patty shook her head sluggishly, gashes eventually discovering over. I ain't care, she said. I ain't watch how dangerous it is. I earned to know. Jack's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him. For the first time, he looked like a man who had run out of defenses. It started with a deal, he said still. Phyllis's eyes flitted, but she didn't intrude. A deal? Patty repeated. Jack jounced. A deal that should no way have been made. It was supposed to break a problem, cover someone. But it created commodity worse. What kind of deal? Patty pressed. Jack dithered again, but this time, there was no avoiding it. The kind that ruins lives, he said. Patty let out a shaky breath. Whose life? Jack's silence answered her. Tell me, she claimed, her voice slightly holding together. He swallowed hard. Someone you know. The words hit like a punch to the gut. Patty's mind contended, cycling through faces, names, recollections. No, it's can't be. Phyllis stepped in, her voice cutting through the chaos. It can, she said. And it is. Patty looked at her, hopeless now. Also say it, she contended. Stop talking in circles and just say it. Phyllis met her aspect. Unyielding. It was someone close to you, she said. Someone who trusted Jack. Someone who no way saw it coming. Patty's knees weakened, and she had to snare onto the nearest face to steady herself. You're lying, she rumored again, but there was no conviction left in her voice. Jack took a step toward her. I no way meant for it to be the way it did, he said. But it did, Patty replied, her voice concave. Yes, he admitted. And you covered it up. Jack didn't answer. He didn't have to. Patty let out a broken laugh, gashes streaming freely now. All this time I allowed. I was the unstable one, she said. The bone. With the crooked history, the one people had to be careful around. But you, she refocused at Jack, her hand shaking, you were hiding commodity like this. It's not the same, Jack said weakly. No, you're right, Patty said, her expression hardening. It's worse. Because at least I no way pretended to be commodity I'm not. Phyllis watched still, her earlier fury now replaced with commodity more complicated remorse, perhaps, or the consummation that indeed the verity has consequences you see and control. What happens now? Patty asked, her voice eerily calm. No bone. Answered. Because no bone. Had a good answer. The verity was out. The damage was done. And there was no going back. Jack looked around the room, at the faces that formerly trusted him, admired him, perhaps indeed loved him. That trust was gone now, replaced with mistrustfulness and dubitation. "I'll fix this," he said eventually, though indeed he didn't feel to believe it. Patty shook her head. "You can't fix commodity like this," she said. "Some effects they do ain't get fixed. They just stay broken." And with that, she turned and walked down, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than any argument, any poke, any secret. Because now everyone knew. And nothing in Genoa City would ever be the same again. Patty's steps echoed long after she had faded, each fading sound leaving behind a heavier silence than the one before it. No bone moved. No bone spoke. It was as if the entire room had been firmed in the fate of an emotional earthquake, the ground beneath them still pulsing indeed though the original shock had passed. Jack remained where he was, gaping at the space Patty had just vacated, as though willing her to come back, willing this moment to rewind itself so he could make a different choice, say different words, be a different man. But reality didn't bend that way. It no way had. Phyllis was the first to break the stillness, though indeed she sounded less certain now. The fire that had fueled her earlier battle bedimmed into commodity quieter, more introspective. "Well," she said vocally, nearly to herself, "there it is." Jack didn't respond incontinently. When he eventually did, his voice was low, rough with the weight of everything that had just unfolded. "Was it worth it?" he asked without looking at her. Phyllis's jaw tensed. "You suppose this was about winning," she replied. "About proving a point?" "I suppose you knew exactly what would be if you said those effects out loud," Jack said, turning to face her at last. His eyes were no longer protective, they were tired, haunted. "You didn't just expose a secret, Phyllis. You exploded it." Phyllis took a slow breath, folding her arms as if to steady herself. "Good," she said, though the word demanded its earlier bite. "Perhaps it demanded to explode." "At what cost?" Jack shot back. "Patty is slightly holding herself together as it is. You suppose this is going to help her?" "Du'ent," Phyllis cut in sprucely. "Du'ent you dare turn this into concern for Patty. However, you wouldn't have prevaricated for times if you were really that upset about her." Jack squinched, the verity in her words landing with painful perfection. "I was trying to cover people," he said, though it sounded weaker now, indeed to his own cognizance. "Cover them from what?" Phyllis demanded. "The verity? Or the consequences of your choices?" Jack didn't answer. Because deep down, he knew. Phyllis shook her head, her expression softening just slightly. "You keep telling yourself you had no choice," she continued, her voice quieter now. "That you did what you had to do. But the verity is you chose the easier path. The one where you didn't have to face what really happened." Jack let out a slow, unsteady breath. "You suppose I haven't faced it?" he asked. "You suppose I do and see it every time I close my eyes?" "Seeing it isn't the same as retaining it," Phyllis replied. That silence again, thick, suffocating, necessary. Across the room, many moping bystanders changed uneasy ganders before still slipping out, unintentional to remain in the fallout any longer. This wasn't just a private conflict presently. It had come commodity bigger, commodity that would ripple through every corner of Genoa City before the day was over. Jack ran a hand over his face, prostration etched into every line. "You could have told me you were going to do this," he said after a moment. Phyllis let out a concave laugh. "And what? Give you time to spin it? To come up with another interpretation of the story that makes you look like the idol?" "That's not fair," Jack said. "No," Phyllis agreed, her aspect steady. "It's not. But neither is what you did." Jack looked down, unfit to hold her aspect any longer. "You were part of it too," he said still. "You don't get to stand there and act like you're above this." Phyllis didn't deny it. "I know," she said. "And I'll live with that for the rest of my life. The difference is I'm not hiding from it presently." Jack's shoulders sagged, the weight of her words settling over him like a storm he could no longer overrun.